Well, good morning. First thing I want to say is that it's been a privilege to be part of the international jury. We've seen wonderful places and we've traveled a lot and seen these magnificent finalists. So also congratulations to the national jury and to the selection we had to visit. Today I want to talk about what I consider the ultimate public space, which is the beach fronts, or the waterfront, sea promenade. I grew up in a Mediterranean city by the water, and I was very aware of this double character. In a way, the promenades are a very social and representative space, but they are also, they could be spaces of complete freedom, and also very vulnerable. And I think there is a danger between this over-programming or adding functions to spaces which haven't been, for several reasons, spoiled, and the preservation of this raw or this original or virginal character of the waterfront. This is a competition we won in, it was an open competition, international, in a moment where Denmark wasn't part of the circle of Europan. It was for architects under 40 years. And it was a perfect chance because you got to build it immediately after winning. No? And the brief was a promenade and a sailing club. In Esbjerg, if perhaps you know, is one of the biggest cities in the west coast of Denmark. Well, you see it. Esbjerg, and it has a huge commercial harbor. And the closest thing to a recreational beach is yachting. In yachting, then we have a stretch which is around 1 kilometer, where the road touches the sand and then goes back. And there were some issues on identity, and a clear identity of the place. There were also some issues. One of the people that was paying the intervention was something called local Anglesfonden, which is the people that are in charge of all the sports in the city. So there were a lot of intentions, also function-wise, in the project. The North Sea can get quite wild, so you put these rock protections, which in a way separates completely the city from the water. But in this case, we also had the motorway, and this, which is actually a retaining wall, it's called Copenhagen Wall. So it's a series of barriers, and of course our intention was to bring the city close to the water and make it usable. This is a kind of ideal view, which happens like a week and a half in the whole year in Denmark. So we have very changing conditions, also very strong tides, ice masses that come. This is a very initial sketch where we already see a sort of infrastructural frame, which is the promenade itself, where we wanted to explore the archetypical relations between firm land and the water. That would be the bay, the peninsula or the pier, the island, and then something more delicate or hazardous, which I will explain later, but you already gathered that there's some other non-infrastructural elements here. No? Well, this is, and of course organizing a series of accesses, and it was very important that there was some sort of clear character, because otherwise it would be a stretch without. So it's very straightforward. We situated a deck, a wooden deck over the rocks, and this deck becomes the perfect occasion. occasion for social interaction, but also for sports, running and so. But also, which is quite important, for contemplation. No? It has this possibility of, you could read it as a 800-meter long chaise longue, no? Where you just reconquer the horizon from your quiet furniture. Those are all drawings from the competition. And this is the result. No? As I say, these other more delicate and unmeasurable elements start appearing here, and in this random world of the poles, and of course this game with the horizon, and is where we had to include, or we wanted to include, all the functions like beach volley and strand soccer and gymnastics and so on, but without making sport fields. So it's a balance between the plastic or artistic and the pragmatic, you know, the use. It's very much about measuring the change of the elements, the tides, the patina of the water coming, the wood getting older, the white that gets from the birds on top, and at the same time, all those devices we invented, like hacking the poles so people could climb. You could see the those playing fields, but also the hammocks, the bars for exercises. In other places is what we have called poison land, where the children can, there's just very low poles and so on. But in a way, what those poles make is that it's a sort of invitation to leave the promenade and jump on the sand. No? Another element is this floating pier, which also plays with the tides. Sometimes it's an island, sometimes it's a deck lying in the sand. And so to the north we have another element, which is the ocean pool. Well, you see what it is, but it gives you the possibility of swimming in any condition, which is, it's been done before, but it's actually quite special when the sea around you is agitated and you're in a completely quiet situation, almost of a bathtub. No? It has, of course, from the promenade, total accessibility in wheelchairs all the way to the water, and different levels for children to swim safely. And then when the water goes back, which can be even, so the water can come all the way till here or go all the way back. And when the water comes back, it sort of becomes, I mean, you don't see it from very far, but when you are approaching, it becomes like a mirror in the, like, well, you know, like when it rains. A pool that reflects the sky is quite a beautiful effect. Then, well, I don't know what this is. Up here, a letter there, but at the north you get the sailing club. Now, in the sailing club, it's just when the terrain starts picking height in the dunes, it's half buried, and you have a buried down basement where you can have open air classes for the sailing, and you have all the ships and windsurf and so on underneath, and then the sailing club is this domineering deck on the top. It's a very simple building. This is what I meant with this tribune and the classroom, the workshops, and the social situation with the deck. Very simple building. It has this panoramic sauna here and the social club there. And in a way, it's like the end of the promenade. You go through the ramp, emerge here, and sort of look south back to the whole stretch of the promenade. I was thinking that in the context of the things we've been seeing these days, with one of the common discussions we had in the bus when we were going is how the spaces that promoters or politicians see as available space to develop, but at the same time they have this condition of last frontier. No? At this point where nature, which is not programmable or predictable or even it meets the city. No? How do we? So this project was very much about trying to find this balance, with all those new functions, which is about sports, motion, training, jogging, playing basketball, whatever, with still having a sort of a raw character of what it was a beach in this. These are, for instance, the hacking for the climbers. Now, the next project is completely the same subjects, but completely different in size and it's the Danish pavilion in 2008 for the exhibition in Zaragoza in Spain. It was an open competition. It was an expo where, for the first time, they wanted, for sustainable reasons, they wanted to reuse to make a big infrastructure that they could use. They could live there and use the next years by making offices and housing and so on. No? So in a way, we had a very determined space, like a big box of concrete, literally. And yet, we wanted to make the same sort of a strategy, a space where we were not obliged to go through an exhibition, where we could rest and be at, or choose our way within the exhibition. No? So the first revolutionary or provocative intention was to leave the exhibition space, which was this 8.5 meter wall, untouched. And there was a big fight with the sponsors and with everybody, because that's where the money often where you can show your project. It was, and then so we came with this scheme that all the perimeter was going to be untouched, as I say, and the policies of the Danish government about their environmental and resources, and so it was going to be in the perimeter of those 5 hanging cylinders. And of course, you could go in any direction there. And then those were hanging at 140 centimeters, and you had to bend your knees, put your head down in cylinders, and then there was no story there except that these elements you would get a sensorial impact there. It could be more or less obvious, like a melting iceberg, which sound was amplified in the whole exhibition. It could be all the things about the windmills that you know from Denmark. You know, it could be you could get there and get completely blown away by wind. No? And there was also games of light and reflections, several things. But so it was very simple, very cheap, but also it was never the same. It was you got this kind of northern light changing through the exhibition, and you can see here the result. I think one of the reasons it became a success, which besides the fact that it cost less than normal, it was because in this almost hysterical environment of an expo, people actually went there to, if you see in the background, this perimetral possibility of rest, and then you could choose where to go or which of the mini exhibitions to choose. No? I think I lack the last. Yes. So the last thing, I just wanted to read something. It has to do with conservation or preservation of the patrimony. In a way, when we think about presenting the patrimony, our history and our buildings, we very much the stress, I think, goes on history, how old things are, function very often, and somehow, I don't know how to formulate it, that's why I will read a little thing I wrote, but how can we shift this weight to considerations of space, and not so much function and history? It's not too long. This is my hometown, the wash house in Altea is called that place. It doesn't matter. In a village overlooking the sea, the architect as a child passed the wash house on his way to school. The building was situated on a south-facing hillside. Lemon and orange trees grew on the terrace above and large almond trees below. The branches of the almond trees stretched through the arcs. Inside, the arcs and branches cast around their shadows, and the running water reflected the light and greenery, filling the roof with color and vibration. The building was made up of plastered whitewashed stone. The concrete wash spaces, shining due to the wear of clothes and soap, looked like polished stone. The system of canals had not changed since the Arabs. By the roadside, the water ran happily across the orchards. But inside the washroom, the canal became larger and the water calmer. The atmosphere and spirit changed. Coming in from the sun, you had to adjust your eyes to see. The scent of jasmine and orange flower hung on to the room. And all sounds were transformed and created a little echo, making you instinctively lower your voice. Imagine also summer moon nights, where lovers could sit on the bench under the arcs. In the time before the washing machine, this had naturally been a place for social meetings and gatherings. At a time, there had been more than 50 people talking, whispering, and singing, women particularly, and children. Some buildings demonstrate their ability to add truth and dignity to human activity. It then seems as though architecture is capable of conquering the depth of life. This also applies to certain churches and markets. The character of agora had thus survived its disappeared original function. The wash house was not a place you went to see. It was a place you passed by, whose influence gained ground little by little. In a church, we expect to find recollection and even reverence. In a wash house, we discover it as a revelation. And 20 years later, we wonder how it was possible. It's a slow learning process. The framework of the landscape, the composition of different elements in chords, the slow and elastic rhythm of the arcs combined with the hypnotic repetition of the wash spaces, the modern cadence of the buttresses. The proportions were generous. The partition to the north was around 5 meters high. It was a place you passed, but it was also a place to hang out with your friends, some sitting around the wash spaces and others under the arcs. For many years, I thought that I might be idealizing a building connected to my childhood and early youth in a Mediterranean village. But the picture sent by a family member confirms the memory. Just the right amount of architecture. The picture revives the place, particularly because of the things that are not told, what the overexposure of light and shadow hides. Today, the wash house does not exist. Also, the entire system of canals has disappeared because someone decided that it was not sustainable enough. And with the water, the frogs, the fish, grass, and freshness of the entire garden disappeared. Instead, black rubber tubes with holes mainly let the water run out. But this is a different story. Something I had, however, forgotten. In the background of the image, just before you leave the wash house, the entire structure is broken to adapt to the terrain. The last arc breaks the rhythm to follow the road. Naturalness and good tone in a work of architecture that is not corseted by the idea or concept. Often we talk about the modesty of the vernacular. I do not believe there was anything modest about the wash house. It had the dignity that follows with being unpretentious and the respect for and understanding of place. And when it came down to it, you felt really good there.